So all she needs is this is what she thinks is working well, and this is what she thinks can be improved upon. That's all she needs. This is what one of her evaluations look like. Again, not necessarily pretty, but it works for her. Some people are mind mappers. How many of you have heard about mind mapping? Okay, so if you've listened to Kyle Hall or Diane Hitzel talk, these people are mind mappers. They put things in spines around a central theme. Same kind of information that I'm showing linearly, but in their case, it's like all over the place like this. And this is a mind map of a speech that Diane Hitzel did in our Past District Governors Club, Seattle International 10. We had a little exercise amongst all of us past district governors that, okay, you got 5 minutes to compose a speech, and here's your subject. And her subject was love today. Okay, so 5 minutes later, she stands up and delivers a speech. From that, I look at this, I say, that is a thing of beauty. I have no idea how she made a speech out of it. No idea at all. But she did. And by the way, she also has her name on the district evaluation trophy. Because Diane is a very good speaker. And this system works for her brain, the way her brain works. Okay. Here's another of Diane's combination of, she took notes on a speech I did using the auditory form, and then she composed her feedback using the mind map. So just some examples of other things that are out there. And so my final point to you is, it doesn't matter what note form you use. What matters is, do you know how your brain works? And what notes-taking system will help you facilitate the use of your brain? So, delivery. This is a kind of a standard structure that I recommend. And you're going to have some kind of an opening. We'll talk about details of what that might look like. Review of the objectives so that we're all on the same page. I'm reviewing John's speech, and he's speaking on project number 4, working with words, and here are the objectives. Okay, so that doesn't take very long to get that out of the way. I'm going to talk about the strengths. I'm going to talk about a couple of improvements. I'm going to summarize, and I'm going to close. Standard evaluation is just a miniature speech. So here's a speech structure that works. One of your closing comments might be, and this is the thing I really like best about your presentation. Leave them on a high. Real effective, particularly if you're in the evaluation contest. Judges tend to take note of that sort of thing. So, all right. What did you see up there?
A duck.
Duckhead.
Duckhead.
Okay, I'm hearing duck.
Rabbit.
Duck.
Well, you heard a rabbit, duck, okay. Now, isn't it interesting? By the way, this is called the I think it's Joseph Jastow's duck rabbit psychologist, big in the psychology world, a la 1899, came up with this drawing and talked to about a lot of things that were going on in psychology in those days. All right, so isn't it interesting that the light comes off the screen, comes down your optic nerve and into your brain, and at that point you impose judgment on what you see. And what do we hear? We heard duck, and we heard rabbit. And it happens all the time. Very rarely do I find an audience where everybody goes, oh, that's a duck. And of course we can look at it and we can say, oh yeah, I see both. But you saw one or the other first. And it depends on how your brain was calibrated before you walked into this room. Based on all your life experiences, your cultural influences, whatever's happened to you, plus whatever's going on with the genetics thing, it all comes to bear, and you come into the room and you get this light, and it's duck or rabbit. Now, you got a speaker standing there, and they're providing you with all kinds of stimulus, optical, auditory. You're watching them move around up here. It comes into your brain, and you pass judgment on what you're hearing, seeing, taking in, experiencing from them as a speaker. And then you're going to give them feedback about that. But guess what? Some of you are duck people, and some of you are rabbit people. So guess what? You got to take ownership of your feedback. You use I statements when you talk about what it is you experienced, what it is you think were their strengths, what it is you think they could improve upon from your perspective, because this is your stuff. By the way, if none of you had had any experience with ducks or rabbits, you wouldn't know what that picture looked like. So you take ownership of when you give feedback to that speaker. I think this worked well. I was delighted. We want to know, how did that speech impact you? I recommend that this is what, in my perspective, it would take to make this better. Take the next plane, whatever. I was confused by. At that point, you can give them feedback which tells them that you weren't sure what they were talking about. Maybe they were being too generic. Maybe they were being unclear. Maybe they said something you disagreed with because your understanding of history is different than their understanding of the way things were. Maybe, like the Battle of New Orleans. Some people will say, well, that's what ended War of 1812. Well, guess what? Battle of New Orleans was fought 3 weeks after this armistice was signed in Washington, D.C. between the British and the Americans. But it took, in those days, that length of time to get down to New Orleans, and by that time they fought the battle and just sort of, punctuated that result that had already occurred in D.C. So the war ended in D.C. 3 weeks earlier. So I was confused when you said the War of 1812 ended with the Battle of New Orleans, because my understanding of history was that this other fact came to bear. And you just leave it at that. I was confused. And then they can go back and they can kind of decide, check their facts. It's a lot better than saying you're wrong. And believe me, when you use I statements and you use them in here to help other people grow, they're more inclined to listen to you. And if you can develop those habits here and you take them into the outside world, then all of a sudden the value of your relationships goes way up. Because now your relationship with your spouse, significant other, your kids, parents, co-workers, now all of a sudden you're talking about what's going on for you as opposed to what's going on for them. Okay, so the antithesis of I statements is you statements. You did this, you said that, you did not do. That kind of structure up front, people don't tend to listen to that as much because you're not taking ownership that this is your stuff, coming out of your brain the way you process stuff. And you can replace you statements with things like, I liked that you. I was confused when you. I didn't think you met the objectives. I've heard people tell me that. Bruce, I don't think you met the objectives of this speech. And that's fine. That's their opinion. I'm okay with that. Things to avoid. The Darth Vader evaluations. Cut, slash, and burn. We don't see them very much. This is where somebody comes in and they see things like, Bruce, I can't believe it. You're a DTM and you use so many ahs and ums in your presentation. I was just so disappointed. What's the problem here? Nobody wants to hear that kind of harsh feedback. It's not reinforcement of strengths, and it's not suggestions for improvement. So don't go with that sort of thing. If somebody walks into your club, signs up, joins up, thinks this is the way it should be done, you need to address it, and you need to address it quickly. If you don't, it will kill your club. I've watched it happen. Okay, whitewash is the antithesis of the cut, slash, and burn. Somebody gets up here and they say, oh, your gestures were good, you moved around the room well, loved your visuals, all in all, very good speech. Thank you very much. And there's nothing specific in that. There's no reinforcements of strengths. There is no suggestions for improvement. So the whitewash is just a way of trying to be nice. That's not what the evaluator is supposed to do. And as a speaker, that's not what you want. Okay, some people, they're new, they're not sure what to do. They come in here and they say, oh, you came up here and you gave us a real clever opening and you told us this story and made this point and this story and made this point, made this story and this made, then you closed and great speech, thank you very much. So they just kind of repeated everything that we all experienced, filled up the time, their evaluation. But again, we didn't hear from their opinion about what was going on, what worked well, what could be improved. Okay. And there's times people get up here and they talk about themselves and they forget to give feedback about the speaker. Oh, your speech about growing up on the farm in Wisconsin reminded me of when I grew up on the ranch in western Colorado, and it was such a great memory experience, and I had a great time, and I had the same kinds of experiences you did, and it's okay to resonate that you heard somebody and maybe it had that kind of an impact, but that doesn't take very long to talk about that. Now let's get on and what did they do well and what could they improve. All right, negative language. Negative language looks like this. I'm here to find something wrong with your presentation and this is it. Or I'm here to find criticisms or negatives. I've heard people actually use those terms. They think that's their job. What is it you did well, and these are the negatives. These are what you did wrong. So now you know, and you can change that behavior. And that's old school thinking about the way this works. None of this stuff is suggestions for improvement, which is what we all are looking for. How can we take this and make it better? So, another little clever one is that an I statement. I was disappointed when you gave your presentation because of these, list them all, which is just a failed, a you statement, disguised you statement. You failed to meet my expectations. Again, has nothing to do with getting better. So, obviously, don't use this, and if somebody comes in here and does, well, you need to call it to their attention. If you're a general evaluator, this is your chance. And they're evaluators. Okay, let's talk about contests. As you can see, this is 2007, and I'm pretty pumped, because it took 6 times for me to get through the humility of a failure before I finally figured out how to get my name on this trophy. So let's talk about what it takes to do that. You have to understand where the judges are coming from. This is their guide. The ballot, of course, is down underneath. That's what they tear off and they send back to be counted. Here's the guide, and there are 4 areas that they recommend people look at. There is a rating on each one of these areas to weight how you might analyze how well the person did. So with this in mind, we try to make sure we meet the needs so that we can get some points on the guide. They don't have to use the guide, but it's there. So let's talk about what it takes. Appearance. Dress up when you're in the contest. Guys, coat, tie. I mean, look professional. Bring some class to the event, as opposed to sweatshirts and blue jeans and things that are kind of trey cash, dumbed down. I know it's a big thing in Seattle here, but resist the urge, because if somebody like this is standing up there speaking and somebody in sweatshirt and blue jeans is standing up there speaking and you're a judge and everything is pretty much the same, which one are you going to give the nod to? See what I'm saying? So give them every reason to vote for you. So you're going to dress up, look professional. You're going to take off the name badge. Name badges are colored differently depending on what level and rank you have. So I just recommend people just take the name badge off, and that way we're just looking at what it is we did in that regard. Protocol introduction. Doesn't matter so much at the lower levels up through, say, division, but it matters when you get to district. If you've got an international president sitting in the audience of your district conference, observing the evaluation contest, or a